Imagine a village built with the same logic as a computer, where every home, every courtyard, and every path follows a perfect pattern. Long before algorithms or artificial intelligence, Africa was already coding reality, not with machines, but with mud, geometry, and the rhythm of life. Across the continent, mathematics wasn't written in equations. It was lived through architecture, music, and community. This is the story of how African villages engineered fractals centuries before computers ever existed. You're watching Echoes of Africa, where we explain Africa's hidden knowledge, one truth at a time. For generations, the world has admired the beauty of African design. We see it in the brilliant colors of a kente cloth, the intricate patterns of a Yoruba crown, and the striking geometry of a Kasena home. It is an aesthetic that speaks of vibrancy, of life, of a deep connection to the earth. But this admiration, so often focused on the surface, has rarely penetrated to the profound science that lies beneath. Behind every pattern there is a precise logic. Behind every rhythm, a deliberate structure. This is not art for art's sake alone. It is a language of knowledge, a system of thought encoded in plain sight, waiting to be understood. What if we told you that the mathematical principles we now celebrate as modern discoveries have been practiced on the African continent for centuries, long before the term was coined in the West? Indigenous builders, artists, and weavers were masters of what we now call fractal geometry. This is the science of self-similarity, the elegant idea that a small part of a structure looks and behaves just like the whole. Think of a fern, where each frond is a miniature replica of the entire leaf, or a river delta, where tiny streams branch off from larger ones, all following the same branching pattern. This is nature's design language, a code for building complex systems with simple repeating rules. From the Sahel to the Congo basin, this principle was the foundation of community and culture. In the villages of the Dogon in Mali, a courtyard mirrored the circular shape of a home. A cluster of homes then mirrored the organic structure of the neighborhood. And the entire village itself was laid out to mirror their conception of the cosmos. Each level of life repeated the same essential form. This is recursion in practice, a design that scales from the micro to the macro, from the family unit to the universe. It is a philosophy built for harmony, not hierarchy, for resilience, not rigidity. This is the story of a hidden mathematical legacy woven into the very fabric of African life. Across the vast landscapes of the continent, from the Sahel to the Congo basin, you could once walk through a village and witness a profound mathematical truth written not in books but in the very shape of the earth. It wasn't abstract theory, it was lived reality, a philosophy made tangible in mud, thatch, and stone. In Mali, the Dogon people arranged their villages in spirals, mirroring the celestial movements they observed in the night sky and the cosmic egg from which all life emerged. Further south, among the Kasena of Burkina Faso, you would find sprawling grid-like family compounds. Each rectangular home was a single unit, which combined with others to form a larger, more complex rectangle, the family compound. These compounds then clustered together, forming the grid of the entire village. This principle is known today as fractal geometry. It's the elegant idea of self-similarity, where a single simple pattern repeats itself over and over at different scales, creating infinite complexity from a single rule. We see it everywhere in nature, in the branching of a tree, the jagged path of a lightning bolt, or the intricate patterns of a snowflake. It is the architecture of life itself, but long before the term was coined, this understanding was deeply embedded in African thought. The Baila of Zambia built their villages in concentric circles, with the chief's home at the center surrounded by his family, then the wider clan, a perfect social map scaling from the individual to the community. The Bakongo express their cosmology in a cross representing the 4 moments of the sun and the cycle of birth, life, death, and rebirth, a pattern echoed in their art and the layout of their communities. The Yoruba of Nigeria designed sprawling cities that grew organically, not from a rigid central plan, but from repeating neighborhood clusters that branched like a living organism. They didn't call it fractal mathematics. They called it order, balance, and the way of the ancestors. It was a sacred geometry, a divine blueprint for society. They believed that life repeats itself at every level, that the structure of a single family reflects the structure of the entire nation, which in turn reflects the structure of the stars. To build in harmony with these recursive rules was to align oneself with the universe. It was to live in truth. In the 1990s, a mathematician named Ron Eglash traveled across Africa, driven by a question most researchers had never thought to ask. In a world that often viewed indigenous African societies through a lens of simplicity, he looked at the intricate design of their communities and wondered, what is the logic behind these village designs? He suspected a hidden mathematical order, a sophisticated language of space that had been overlooked for centuries. Enjoying this? Subscribe to Echoes of Africa for more. Thank you. To understand what he found, we must first understand a concept from modern mathematics, the fractal. A fractal is a pattern that repeats itself at different scales. Think of a tree where a small branch looks like a miniature version of the entire tree, or a coastline where a small section has the same jagged complexity as the whole. This property is called self-similarity. It's a geometry built on recursion, a simple rule applied over and over again, creating infinite detail from a single starting point. It's the geometry of nature itself, found in lightning bolts, snowflakes, and the very veins in our hands. With this concept in mind, Eglash began to map the shapes of settlements across the continent. When he analyzed the circular layouts of Baila villages in Zambia, he saw the large circle of the village fence mirrored in the smaller circles of family compounds, which were themselves mirrored in the circular form of individual homes. In Burkina Faso, the Kassena people decorate their homes with geometric motifs that echo the layout of the entire compound. As he moved from the Bakongo settlements in Congo to the sprawling Yoruba compounds in Nigeria, he noticed a shocking and undeniable pattern. Each design repeated itself at multiple scales, just like a modern fractal. Every path, every courtyard, every wall seemed to follow the same recursive rhythm. It was an algorithm written in earth and stone, a complex system of social and spiritual logic made visible. This wasn't just architecture, it was a philosophy of interconnectedness, where the part always contained the essence of the whole. The same scaling logic appeared in textiles, in the polyrhythmic beats of their music, and in the intricate braids of their hairstyles. Glash called it African fractal architecture. But this was no recent invention. It was an ancient indigenous knowledge system, a form of mathematics that Western science was only beginning to formalize with computers. The very patterns that now inform our digital world, from data compression to antenna design, had been mastered here for generations. The truth is, it was there all along, a silent mathematical symphony waiting for someone to listen. A fractal is a pattern that repeats itself endlessly. Whether you zoom in or zoom out, it looks the same. You can find fractals in snowflakes, in trees, in rivers, and even in lightning bolts. Mathematicians write it as fx, AXF beaks, a pattern that reproduces itself. But in Africa, this idea wasn't written on paper. It was built into the environment. The design of the village was a mirror of nature, and the people living inside it were part of the equation. African fractals weren't just designs, they were living systems. When a family grew, they built new huts in the same shape as the old ones, expanding outward in perfect proportion. Each generation repeated the geometry of the last, not by copying, but by growing naturally like branches extending from a tree. It was an algorithm of life, renewed by every birth, every building, every season. And though no one used computers, the rules they followed were as precise as any digital code. You can see these fractals not only in architecture, but in art, music, and craft. African weavers used recursive patterns in their textiles, each thread repeating motifs within motifs. Drummers played rhythms that echoed across scales, beats within beats, cycles within cycles. These were not random choices. They were expressions of proportion and harmony. Mathematics wasn't something separate from culture. It was culture. It was the rhythm of creation itself. In music, African drummers mastered the art of recursion long before it was graphed. A rhythm might start with one beat, then expand to a full pattern, then a sequence of patterns echoing the same motif, each layer a reflection of the other. This was more than art. It was philosophy in a way to experience time as a living, breathing geometry, and in spiritual belief this same principle guided creation. Among the Dogon of Mali, the universe was born from a seed near a single point unfolding infinitely, just like a fractal. For the Dogon, every living thing carried the same pattern, from stars to seeds to souls. Their temples and villages were built in the shape of galaxies. Their ceremonies mirrored the movement of planets. And their wisdom said, as above, so below. They believed that to understand the small was to understand the vast, that the structure of the universe repeats itself in all things. Modern physics now says the same, that reality is recursive, self-similar, and infinite. Africa knew this long before equations could describe it. Colonial scholars saw this beauty, but they called it coincidence. They refused to believe that mathematical genius could exist in non-Western societies. For them, African knowledge was primitive, not scientific, but science without humility blinds itself. The evidence was always there in the in the design of cities, in the engineering of the Benin walls, in the star maps of Nubia and Egypt. Africa's legacy of knowledge was erased so that Europe could claim it later as discovery. Yet knowledge does not die, it waits for rediscovery. Today, fractal logic is everywhere. In the way computers render images, in the way networks grow, in the way AI learns. The same recursive patterns that powered African architecture now powered digital civilization. The future, it turns out, was written in Africa's past. Africa didn't just inspire technology, it predicted it, it engineered it with harmony, with balance, and with rhythm. History buried this brilliance under centuries of silence, but knowledge never truly disappears. It echoes. It echoes in our art, in our science, in our cities, and in our souls. Knowledge buried is knowledge reborn. You've just witnessed the geometry of African genius. Subscribe to Echoes of Africa to uncover more of the knowledge that shaped our world, one truth at a time.